Okay, so there it was. Maybe I can take Nala and run. Maybe I should take Nala and run. Maybe I will take Nala and run, but I really couldn't because the police were on their way. I'd like to bring in my new guests to join us with Mike Korobonics, my Jersey boy, and Francey Hakes. Hi, Francey. How are you?
Good, thanks, Linda. Good to be with you.
Yeah, and you know that Francey does a lot to protect the children. She is a formidable foe in the courtroom, a formidable prosecutor. We've been on with this case before. We've discussed the difference between postpartum depression and postpartum psychosis. Francey Hakes, what is the difference, and why does it matter in this case?
Well, one of the things that struck me, just to get off your question for 1 second, but one of the things that struck me in that last clip was what the neighbor said that Cheyenne said, and that is, let's.
Oh, wow,
so
I missed that part.
She's far more concerned with getting the dog and running than she is about seeing to her dead infant son. And that tells me everything I need to know. I mean, everyone talks about postpartum. I get it. It's a very difficult issue. It's a difficult mental problem. I accept that. But I just do not think that that is an adequate excuse for the level of neglect that you saw here, and especially with her words afterward. I think they let that child die.
Well, let me ask both you and Mike, and let me first go to Mike to ask him. I would embrace all this and say this is so messed up. She is so messed up in the head for whatever happened in her life. Obviously, there's something wrong when you leave your child to die. Therefore, she is sick, and you know she didn't commit the murder. She was just a bad mother. What say you?
Well, I said
Mike?
any port in the storm, and I think this storm is getting really bad. And I think, I think that's really the only type of defense you can have where you maintain your own credibility with the jury. And you
that's
just
important,
embrace,
isn't it?
it's very important.
Right. And Francey, along that line, if you say that, if you say that to this jury, that still keeps your credibility as a lawyer, because who can argue that this case is horrible, right?
Well, you're right. I mean, it is absolutely horrible. But the problem that the defense has in this case is that the neglect level was so horrific and contrasts so distinctly with the treatment of the other child, Nala, that I don't think they can overcome that inconsistency by just saying everything's a mess, because everything wasn't a mess. Nala was fine.
Right, and that's why I say to you, ladies and gentlemen, there's something more going on in this case. I think I have a finger on it, maybe a hand. I don't take a break and find out after the break. Stay tuned. We have some breaking news here on the Law&Crime Network. It turns out that while we were discussing Cheyenne Harris, what came down was a 119-page opinion in the matter of Sandusky. Remember him? Sandusky, Penn State, child abuse. We have a theme here today. Jerry Sandusky is not getting a new trial. That's the good news for those who support his conviction, which we all do. The bad news for the prosecution is he is getting a new sentencing hearing. The judge in the case ruled that under U.S. Supreme Court decisions and law that the application of mandatory minimums to the 45 counts, some of which he was convicted of, were not proper. So his sentence, which was for, and I will tell you right now, 30 to 60 years, he has to be resentenced. Your reaction, Francey Hakes?
Well, my reaction is this is a real tragic day for the victims, because they're going to have to come back and give victim impact again, even if the judge tells them they don't have to, or he will consider their statements from the last time. They're going to feel obligated. I don't blame them. I'd want to do it if I were them. So it's going to re-victimize them all over again. It's just going to open all those old wounds.
Right. And Mike Korobonics, the U.S. Supreme Court has said that the jurors have to consider what could give longer sentences and shorter sentences. They have to hear the facts, okay? Right? And is Francey right then? I mean, is this re-victimization, or is this a win for justice because the law wasn't followed in the first place?
Well, I think it's a balancing, and I do agree with Francey. It's bad for the victims because they have to relive this, they have to go through this again. And it's also become sometimes these matters of sentencing with a guy like Sandusky become really just procedure rather than practicality. I mean, Sandusky's 75.
Right.
Even if they reduce his sentence, I mean, he's probably going to die in prison regardless of what the sentence is. I mean, there's studies out, I believe.
And no one's going to be shedding a tear.
And no one's going to. But someone, I think, over 65, the impact of incarceration is like 2 years for every year you serve in your life expectancy, and it just seems like it's a little bit of much to do about nothing, and sometimes I get disappointed.
Wait a second, is it much to do about nothing if a judge doesn't apply the law? Francey Hakes.
Well, I agree with you, Linda. I mean, the judge obviously has to apply to the law. It's very important that the judge follow the law, and if there was something wrong done, then the Court of Appeals had every right and obligation to send the case back. I just think it's unfortunate. Mike is right that Sandusky won't survive long in prison. I'm happy to say it. That doesn't make me shed a tear, as you say. But I think the point of a long sentence, even for expect he'll get another long sentence regardless.
Yeah, and Mike, just as we're talking about the Cheyenne Harris case, she, according to unrefuted reports, corroborated reports, had been victimized, sexually abused as a child. So we see how it can affect people in different ways. Here, it resulted maybe in the loss of another child. But you don't know. We heard some of the effects of these victims, and we don't know the long-term effect of them and their family, and there's collateral damage, isn't there, Mike?
There is, but just getting back, there's always collateral damage, but just getting back to something, I believe this, as a lawyer practicing a while, and like us all in this room have done, we've all done trial work, is just because you're
I've only been practicing about 2 years, it's okay.
Just because you're in appellate court or Supreme Court doesn't mean you got the law right. It just means your interpretation is the one you got to live with.
Then, Francey, do judges, because it's a high-profile case and we want to get him, and sometimes we're guilty of that too, you know, in the public when I'm not being the defense lawyer, you know, you want retribution. But is that fair? I mean, really, shouldn't we all take a step back and say, okay, guilt's been proven, now let's take a step and let's look at this sentencing scheme? I mean, isn't that what justice is about? Isn't that what our system is about? Isn't that what America's about, until some will say the last election, but I won't go there.
Well, you know, Linda, it's an interesting point. You can look at it really two ways. Judges should feel some public pressure in the sense that if there is that sense of the community that these crimes should be taken seriously and that therefore high punishment is merited, then the judge should do it. You had a judge just this week sentence an offender to something low and say that the 13 and 14-year-old girls who were victimized sexually by this man were the ones who were responsible because they were the aggressors. So clearly judges have not gotten the message yet, even with sentences like Sandusky. So I do think that you've got a bit of a dueling effort here when it comes to judges and sentencing.
Okay, so on that note, we are going to go back into the trial of Cheyenne Harris for the murder that is being charged against her of her 4-month minus 1 day child, Sterling. The Child Protective Services worker, Sheila Schroeder, testified. Let's listen to her again.
Wanting me to give that I am not giving?
No, now that you've put in 36, we are fine with the instructions.
And 36 has now become 35.
Okay.
And the language I gave to you was satisfactory?
Yes.
Defendant's purpose in offering the testimony of Dr. O'Hara was not in furtherance of a claim she was insane or incapable of forming a specific intent in August of 2017, but rather to support her theory that SK's death was accidental, correct?
What did you mean by that?
When I was asking questions and gathering information, there were times when I was asked to refer to law enforcement for those questions because they had already been answered.
What do you mean?
Her partner just talked about the things that I was asking had already been answered by law enforcement, and it didn't seem that they would wanted to talk about those things a second time with me.
Did you ask Ms. Harris, the defendant in this case, to explain why she believed Sterling had died on August 30th, 2017?
Yes, I've talked with her about that.
And what did she tell you?
Her partner had indicated that the child had died from SIDS, and she agreed with that statement.
What is SIDS?
Sudden infant death.
Well, that is the CPS, Child Protective Services worker, and this is a case that Child Protective Services was needed before that, Mike Korobonics. Don't you agree?
Absolutely.
And that's because why?
Well, there was just nobody watching here, and things just got out of control. It just seemed things just kept spiraling and spiraling, and nobody notified the authorities for them to get involved in this case prior to it.
Yeah, but Francey Hakes, there's some testimony that indeed there were follow-up visits at the hospital after the baby had diagnosed to have meth in the umbilical cord, after she was diagnosed with postpartum depression, after she was diagnosed with PTSD, after it was confirmed that she had been sexually assaulted in the past. What does she have the duty then to go back to the hospital for the follow-up, or somebody should have come out and seen her?
Well, that's a great question. I mean, ultimately, it's her responsibility. It's her child. She's a grown woman. She is supposed to care for that child. The law recognizes her duty to protect the child, not the hospital's duty to protect the child when it comes to cases of crime like this.
Yeah, but you know what? I see in my correspondence a lot of cases where child protective services shouldn't be involved, in cases such as divorce cases where one parent's pitting another and there's no reason. But in cases like this, it seems there's always some kind of miss. And, you know, it happens in New York. We see it. It happens in New Jersey. What do we do about it? It's a big problem.
Well, you know, it's very complicated because this is life. I mean, they're an agency run by human beings. I mean, people make mistakes. I know that doesn't sound right. It doesn't sound right, but we're all doing the best we can. As attorneys, we do the best we can. We're not robotic. People make mistakes. Things fall through the cracks. No one did the best for this young Sterling. No one did the best. I mean, you know, maybe the Nala Francey Hakes, who was testimony that she would sometimes go in and see this baby. Maybe Nala did, but no one did right by Sterling, whose name was for Sterling Silver. I don't get it. Do you?
No, of course not. I think that this kind of child abuse, it goes so far beyond neglect. It's child abuse is appalling and utterly incapable
and let me ask you
of
one more question.
explanation.
There's one more. You know, we all know the case of Andrea Yates way back when in Texas. She had postpartum psychosis where she killed her 5 kids. And everyone diagnosed her. Everyone said she shouldn't have another baby, and she did because her husband wanted the baby. That is a different case than this, isn't it, Francey?
Well, that is. I mean, she murdered all her children. In this case, you're talking about murder charges, but with little baby Sterling, he was simply denied life-saving sustenance. There is a difference, but to me, in this case, it is still incredibly serious and may very well rise to the level of murder because you're talking about a completely helpless infant.
Yes, yeah, and boy. And you know what? The prosecution didn't let Dr. O'Hara's testimony rest from the defense. He was the child psychologist who talked about postpartum depression. They brought in a rebuttal witness after their case, and the defense goes, the prosecution brings in another case in their rebuttal, and he was a psychiatrist from the same university that Dr. Harris is from. His name is Dr. Dennard. We saw his opening. We saw his presentation earlier. We saw his direct. Now we're going to watch his cross. Let's see if it makes a difference in your mind.
Tele-interview that you did, was that recorded?
I didn't record it, and I'm unaware that it was recorded. It was, Ms. Harris was in custody, and I don't know if they routinely record those or not.
Okay. As far as a record, for example, Dr. O'Hara provided a report that we provided to the state, and I'm assuming you had a chance to review, correct?
Yes.
Okay. And within that report, he documents the conversation that he had with Ms. Harris?
Yes.
Okay. Did you document that as well?
I took notes,
okay,
but I didn't make a written report. I wasn't asked to do that.
And the reason I asked is because when Ms. Timmons was asked about Ms. Harris's feelings towards Sterling, and you said that she had related to you that she thought Sterling was to blame for some of the problems with the family, is that a word-for-word quote?
I can't tell you if it was precisely word for word. It was close to verbatim, but I can't guarantee it was verbatim. The term "why my family was messed up" was word for word.
And I think you said, and I don't want to put words in your mouth, but when she was telling you that, she says, basically looking back and in retrospect, now that she's no longer messed up and thinking clearly, and she's trying to figure out what happened, then she's explaining those things to you, correctly?
Correct.
So she prefaces it with, now I can see what was going on.
Yes.
Wow. I mean, that's why the defense had to leave that statement not as it was. So here Dr. Dennard said that she made some statement that he didn't write down, by the way, or put in a report, which was another issue, but that the defendant, Cheyenne, believed that Sterling was to blame for some of the members of the family. Looking back, so maybe it's not as bad, but I've always had the suspicion that this was the Cinderella child, Mike Korobonics, and we've talked about it in break, that somehow, because she was having an affair after Sterling died, somehow maybe the husband, Zachary, not the husband, boyfriend, thought maybe she was having an affair, maybe this wasn't his kid, there was DNA testing, and that led to some of these issues. There's no evidence in the case. It was just my thoughts as a defense attorney. What say you?
You sold me on it.
I sold you on it.
Frankly, you sold me on it.
Well, Mike Korobonics is on my jury.
And you sold me on, not only did you sell me on it, if that's really a theory, I think the prosecution should have brought that forward more so, because that really gives you...
They took the DNA, and they proved that the child was Zachary, so maybe it got dropped there.
That would be irrelevant, though. To me, that would be irrelevant.
Oh, interesting.
Because it would be what the thought process was of these people, and I think that really would show, even that would take her out of that sympathetic role and show her as acting with intent to say, I chose him over my child, which would be really revolting to a jury.
Or if you had the other thing, Francey Hakes, could you say that, you know, this person who was treated, you know, there's a fairy tale Cinderella, she has a glass slipper, she married as a prince, which we all know is untrue, but you know, in terms of this child being looked at differently by her, could you say that for some reason she's in this relationship, she can't get out, she has no place to go, she has all these issues, and therefore she wants to please him? She knows it's his child, but she wants to somehow please him, and there's heat there. Could you have made that defense here?
You know, Linda, I call this the juggling defense, because what the defense is trying to do here is throw so many different balls in the air: postpartum depression, infidelity, trying to please, child abuse in her history, which, by the way, the statistics show that victims of child sexual abuse do not grow up to become criminals or child abusers in any greater numbers than the general population. But the defense is trying to throw as many balls in the air as they can so that hopefully, oh, look at this one, look at this one, look at this one, and the jury will look at one of them and avoid looking at the truth, which is that this woman let her baby die because he starved to death and died of a massive infection covered in maggots.
Well, you know, the truth may be both, Francey. Maybe that's what she did, and she still has all these issues. I'm not sure we're going to resolve it. Thank God the jury has to resolve it. But right now, we have to take a short break. We'll be back into this trial when we come back. Stay with us. Well, there's no doubt that Cheyenne Harris used meth, because the meth was found in Sterling's umbilical cord when he was born. It's scientific, okay? They knew. Everybody knew, all right? Here, Mike Korobonics, the social worker, is telling us that somebody who has drug use, especially illegal, and this is the methamphetamine, apparently pretty severe, okay, may have a child that they neglect, not feed, not change their diapers. Does this sound like a familiar case to you?
It's very familiar, and quite frankly, I'm surprised there wasn't any objection, because I think that this state's witness was actually reciting the facts of this case as opposed to giving a generalization. I think whenever you have a witness for the state going to sort of the facts that need to be established in front of the jury, you're treading in very dangerous areas for the prosecution. I'm surprised they went that far.
Well, but Francey Hakes, again, formidable federal prosecutor who protects children all the time. If they know about this, and this is where I go back to, when you have a child that is born in a hospital that has the meth in the umbilical cord, and the mother, we know it had to come back and didn't, and now we're hearing that this child had died exactly from the symptoms that a drug addict of someone who takes methamphetamine like she did would have. I mean, what is there anybody else you really want to hang up by their sneakers here?
Well, Linda, that's a great way to put it. Frankly, the parents are the ones that I want to see hung up by their sneakers. Cheyenne Harris may have been on methamphetamine, but again, her other child, Nala, seems not to have been neglected. So this, to me, looks very purposeful. And as the prosecutor, I would continue to hammer that home with the jury. But absolutely, there was some kind of failure in the system when methamphetamine is detected in the umbilical cord and there is not a criminal investigation into the parents. Somebody failed. I don't think that means they're responsible for the child's death, but somebody failed, and it could have saved the child's life had there been police intervention.
Boy, in the court system, we always want to save a life. We want to save people that don't get wrongfully convicted. We want to do all the right things, and yet here, this is a case that shows us that everything wrong was done. Maybe this case will come to some remedy. Let's go to break. Well, that's Cheyenne Harris talking about all the things she does when she wakes up in the morning and when her other child, who's a toddler, who's young, named Nala, a girl, comes to her and she plays with her and she leaves the door open and all. If you're doing all this stuff with your other child, it shows you have parenting skills. Let's just take New Jersey and then we can expand it out because I'm sure it's the same in the other 50 states, right?
Yes.
All right.
This is just, you hear it and it's just, like Francey said, it just shows so much intent and specific intent. You're paying attention to everything in the world except this child who's it's upsetting.
You can't even talk anymore. Francey, I have to go to you because Mike Corbonics, he's so upset he can't even talk anymore. Now, when you have a defendant in a case, and I know that you protect children, but sometimes people are not guilty of charges or not guilty of top counts. And doesn't your appearance at the trial, at the table there with your counsel, also have an effect? I mean, I've had a camera on me. I can't tell you how many times when I'm with a defendant in a case. But in this situation where you're talking about the death of your child, tell us how that differs.
Well, of course, the cameras are always on the table where the defendant is very deliberate with her hair pulled back, or when she wants to put her face down, her hair falls so that the jury can't actually see her face. So these things are all part of courtroom theatrics. But can I just say one thing, Linda?
Yes, please,
Mike
Francey.
made a great point. I feel like I've converted Mike. I feel victorious today because the list that Cheyenne ran through just then with the police is shocking in its detail and deliberation. This was not a woman in a drug-addled haze. This was a woman who was playing on her phone, getting the child a sippy cup, playing with her in bed, taking her back out, putting her in her playpen, letting her back out on the couch. She said changed her. Did you hear that? She changed her. So and I'm sorry if you can hear the...
No, go ahead.
I'm sorry if you can hear the sirens. The police are coming to get me. I don't know what's happening. But this was so deliberate, all these steps, and to care for the one child, while at the same time the other child is dying of a massive infection and starvation. It is shocking. And if I'm the prosecutor, I'm going through the whole list and writing every single thing on a flip chart or a board.
Well, as a matter of fact, one of the most gruesome moments then at this trial has to be when this mother finds her baby dead, right? It's something that no one wants to ever do. What did this mother do when she found her? What did she do?
What do you remember next?
She wakes me up around noon.
Is everybody sleeping?
She was actually in the playpen right next to the bed.
Okay.
On Zach's side, of course.
And Sterling was in a different bedroom? Okay. So Nala wakes up around noon. What happens next?
I got up and changed her diaper. Went to the bathroom myself. fed her. And then I got her set up in the living room to watch a movie for a little bit.
What did you feed her? Do you remember?
Cold cheese.
That's okay.
And vanilla wafers.
Okay.
Because I figured then it'd be a mix of breakfast and lunch.
Did you get her set up in the living room?
And then I went and laid down on the side for a little bit. And I started thinking, it's been a while since I heard from Sterling.
This baby is dead no matter what we do. Now it's just about what happens to her. I'm going to thank Francey Hakes. Francey, you're going to be staying on with Aaron Keller's show, The Daily Debrief. Please stay with us. Mike Korobonics, always my Jersey boy, always a pleasure, ladies and gentlemen. This has been a day we've discussed sexual harassment, sexual cases, but that doesn't mean everybody who's accused is guilty. We take it here in Law and Crime, case by case. It's about justice. It's about law. Justice and law. I'm Linda Kenny Bodden. Stay tuned. I'll be back with you next week.